We will now move on to the next section of our day. To begin with the third session, I would invite Dr. Nikhil Balakrishnan to initiate our session. May I kindly ask you to unmute the mic and switch on your camera. I also welcome our speakers. Over to you, Dr. Nikhil.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're nice and audible.
Hi. So we're going to start our IC right now. This is a young IC session. And I'll just check if all our speakers are here.
I'm here, Nikhil. Yeah.
Gaurav,
yeah. How are you?
Hi, Gaurav.
Hi, Nitin. Sir.
I'll just wait for a couple of minutes and I think we can start off then.
I think we can start off. People will join in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you should not waste time. Just start
Okay,
and people will keep joining. Huh?
Yes, sir. So good morning, one and all. The IC topic for today is targeting 2020 refractive cataract surgery. As the name suggests, a cataract surgery nowadays just does not involve aiming to get the patient a 6/6 vision, but also importantly, the patients demand a lot of quality of vision. And for this, what we need is also, besides having a vast array of tools, but the knowledge of how we can implement all those tools in our daily practice so that we can give patients better surgical outcomes. So in our IC today, we would have a list of 6 speakers. The first speaker for the day is Dr. Gaurav Luthra, sir. Sir needs no introduction. He's a very famous, well-renowned cataract and refractive surgeon, the medical director of Drishti Eye Care Center. He's been a speaker on many national and international podiums, and he would be today talking on comparing new age biometers. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Nikhil, and congratulations for putting together this wonderful course. It looks really exciting and something very close to my heart as well. So I'll try to do justice to the new age optical biometers. And is my screen visible?
Yes,
sir. Okay. So I think biometry has come a long way, and we started off by trying to predict IOL by measuring various dimensions of the eye and their interrelationships, and use this to determine. And there were the times when we used to do contact ultrasound, and Dr. Nitin will probably relate to what I'm saying. When we only used to have one type of A scan, there used to be a Humphreys A scan, which all of us used to have, and do our measurements, and then gradually we moved on to immersion and everything else. So I think today we've come a long way, and in fact, I will just talk about few of the prerequisites today that are there. I mean, we can go to any extent with what we can measure, but today we would want a good keratometry with the correct magnitude of astigmatism and the axis of astigmatism. We would look at the axial length. And typically, these were the 2 things we would be satisfied with, but today we can go on and on and on. So we could go to the AC depth, the lens thickness, the ELP, and the white to white, and of course, corneal thickness, and so many more things. But these are the basic, most important things that any optical biometer would be looking at. So currently, I think we've come a long way. We've come from the Javel shots, which I used to use, as a PG. We would do like maybe 100 odd Javel shots keratometries in one day for our biometries. And the Bausch & Lomb keratometer, which is again still there in many clinics, coming to the contact biometers, then the the immersion, and then coming on to the optical biometers, where the IOL Master 500, was the first one, and it was there in almost every top surgeon's clinic. And today we've come to the swept source OCTs and the ray tracing mechanism. But what's most important, why we need to do all this? The applanation contact A scans would have a plus minus 0.24 mm range of error, which can give you a prediction of as much as a half to 1 diopter, depending on whether you're dealing with a myopic or a hypermetropic eye. The immersion scans got much better, and frankly, for the last 10-15 years, we've always mentioned that immersion A scans would be almost very close to optical biometers, but you can still see that there is a difference of almost 0.12 mm scope of error plus minus 1. Whereas optical biometers typically would have errors only of plus minus 0.01 mm. So you can see that there are magnitudes of difference between the 3, and that's why it's so important today to move to an optical biometer, not just because of the axial length, because of the accuracy of measurement of all the parameters we spoke about, right from the corneal thickness to the keratometries to the axis to the AC depth, because all of them go into the modern formulas. It's not just the axial length which you can get from the A-scan. So these are some of the currently available biometry devices, which you can see. It contains several of them. So there is not just Lenstar and IOLMaster. You will have so many. There is a nice one from Tomy, even the Pentacam AXL, Oculus, and the IOLMaster 700, which has become one of the best, optical biometers. And then, of course, the Antirion, which is now available from the Heidelberg. So when we compare partial coherence interferometry, which is the laser interferometry used in the IOLMaster 500. It basically uses a more basic form of a light source and a scanning slit, which is comparable to the Lenstar uses the OLCR, or the optical low coherence reflectometry, which provides axial measurements of the entire eye from the cornea to the retina. So seems to be much more accurate. And let's look at the advantages and disadvantages. So it tends to give you the true central corneal power, that's the OLCR, and measures 32 points in 2 circles and inner and outer diameters, and measures size and centricity of the pupil. However, it may have limitations because of low penetration in dense cataracts. And in posterior subcapsular cataracts, typically, the Lenstar, although with the newer nomogram, the newer style of measurement that it uses, it has improved a lot, but there can be a small limitation in few cataracts. And so we have worked with several of these machines. And the Pentacam AXL is another new kid on the block, which is combined stream flux tomography with axial length and total eye wavefront measurements, and then objective refraction and retroillumination. This is something which I haven't used, but it has several advantages. So the low and high order aberrations of the eye are measured as well. And the retroillumination technology for the preoperative assessment of the lens opacities and for the post-op IOL position can be judged, but it does not measure the lens thickness or the pupil size, which can be a big drawback, and it's slow, and therefore there's scope for errors. So going on, I think if we choose the Lenstar to begin with, I have maximum experience with the Lenstar. So I've been working with it for more than 10-15 years. I have used the IOLMaster 700 for a while as well. But the Lenstar, we'll compare the two technologies. These are the two most popular biometers today, and they're the new ones as well. So it does all these measurements, as you can see, almost everything that you need, including the retinal thickness, which is very, very important because this is what differentiates it from the other newer OCTs as well. And the keratometry, I think, is best in class because it does a 32-point keratometry. If you compare it to the IOLMaster 500 or even to the 700 today, we'll do that later. It does 500 used to measure only 6 points. So there was a big difference between what the Lenstar was doing. However, today the 700 with very new features on keratometry has changed the game as well. So also many of the new biometers come with these Placido clip-on devices or built-in devices. The Lenstar has the T-cone. The Tomy has a nice Placido as well. And today the IOLMaster 700 tries to do something similar by interpolating data. So the Placido is useful when you want to do toric IOL planning, and also in clinics where you want to rule out corneas which may be suspect or keratoconus, so that you don't go wrong with when doing toric IOL. So I think it's important to have a Placido if possible on your biometer. If not, then you can have a standalone, but that will add to the cost. So all these formulas are available on the Lenstar, the Hill RBF, which only comes with the Lenstar, and it's one of the very good artificial intelligence formulas today. The Barrett's, which almost everybody relies on today, including the toric calculator and the TrueK for post-refractive eyes. And then, of course, all the other usual formulas are all there. So you have a choice to use that with the Lenstar at least, and with many other machines. So advantages, instead of slit imagery, which the 500 use, this uses optical biometry. So it's much more accurate for all the anterior chamber depth measurements as well, and the corneal thickness. And also it has a high density keratometry, so that makes the keratometry very robust for, especially for toric IOL planning. And also does several other functions, but some disadvantages that very dense cataracts, you may miss it. So typical penetration rate is about 94 to 95%. IOLMaster 700 now claims 99%, but that remains to be checked. So there was this new mode of, on the Lenstar, which kind of concluded that the new measurement mode of the OLC system provides a significant increase in the number of eyes that can be measured. So it kind of comes pretty close to the 700 now. Then again, this benchmark study, which I think came out of Narayan Netralaya, which compared 4 biometers, and the dropouts for axial length measurement were significantly higher in the Nidec ALScan and the Galili G6 compared to the 700. But there was very good agreement between the 700 and the Lenstar LS900 for axial length and keratometry, which are probably the most important 2 parameters. So pretty comparable there. And then this another study, which basically was trying to again do the repeatability of different optical biometers, comparing the swept source. So again, agreement of the axial length, AC depth, and spherical equivalent between both the PCI and the swept source was excellent, and the OLCR was found to be pretty good. And there, we switch on to the swept source, which is typically the Tommy and the 700. Some new features there. So the principle is based on swept source technology, and that also has several other, very sharp features. The distance independent telekeratometry, and so the telecentric keratometry, which changes the game again. And then, of course, it does measure the posterior corneal surface and therefore provides for the total K. And that total K can be used for the different formulas, especially the Barrett's total K formulas, which are good for post-refractive surgeries. So this is how the TK works. And you can see that it can be integrated into several of the formulas. And I will not go into details of how it works, but it basically allows you to customize the posterior corneal curvatures and feed them into the new formulas and use them. So it remains to be seen how effective it will be. So the Barrett's TK Universal 2 and the Barrett's TK Toric are being used by several users today. The Barrett's, the IOLMaster 700 comes with all the formulas, the Barrett suite, so it contains all the newer formulas, and including the TK formula, which is only on the 700. And it does give you the retina fixation check for the fovea. So it has several frills to it. And these also would be kept in mind when you're trying to decide which optical new biometers you might want to invest in. So it has great keratometry. It has great, penetration of the intense cataracts, and also the fixation check. Recently introduced is the central topography. Nikhil, feel free to just warn me like 30 seconds before you want me to finish. Okay, so then I'll just close it out. Yeah. So the new formula, the new thing on the 700 is the central topography, and this has been derived from fewer points. So the difference between the Lenstar and the IOLMaster 700 topography is basically that the Lenstar uses a Placido, whereas the 700 uses basically 19 points, which are from the cornea. So Lenstar typically is using almost 8,000 points. So I feel that I've used both. I mean, I've seen the Lenstar T-cone and I've seen a little bit of the topography. I feel that on this aspect, the Lenstar scores over the 700, while on many others, the 700 scores over it. So the topography on the Lenstar will be way better than what you can get on the 700. And so several advantages there. I think it can go through posterior subcapsular cataracts, which are more close to the nodal point of the lens, and tilt and decentration of the lens can be detected. And it also comes integrated with the Callisto and the microscope, so you can have total markerless surgery, and it really makes a lot of difference to your integration of surgeries when you're doing toric IOLs. So only disadvantage to me would be that the cost of the 700, which is quite exorbitant, almost twice of what other biometers cost. And the Barrett's TK still remains to be seen whether it still gives you good outcomes. So going on, I think I'll go on to the Tommy, which also is a swept source, pretty good. It also comes with a Placido, does all the routine things, and gets all through all the dense cataracts, does good planning for toric IOLs, and is pretty good as well. And going to the last one, few slides on the Antirion, because I have to finish. Antirion comes with, this is the new kid on the block, almost again, another 20 lakhs more expensive than the other machine, but it comes with lots of other things that you can do: the imaging app, the cornea app, the metrics app, and the cataract app. And it has several advantages. Yeah, I'll finish in 10 seconds. So it gives you the corneal wavefront analysis, and also gives you the corneal maps, including the anterior chamber angle, and it gives you the topography, the epithelial thickness mapping. It gives you almost all that you need and way beyond, and gives you all the aberrations as well. So I think going on, we've come a long way, and the take-home message is that optical biometry, I think, has come a long way. We still talk about whether to take an optical biometer. The option should be which optical biometer to take. There are so many choices today. Over 95% eyes can be measured even with very dense cataracts, and IOL formulas keep getting better and better. And over 90% outcomes within plus minus 0.5 using newer formulas like the Hill RBF3 and the Barrett's. And all-in-one devices are making life much easier with never before accuracy. However, cost remains a big factor because all these machines are very expensive, and patients might expect great quality without actually having to pay for what they don't know what goes behind it. Right? I think ray tracing holds great promise. It'll overcome all the formulas as well once it comes of age. So with that, I think I'll stop here, and thanks Nikhil and Nitin sir for allowing me to speak in this course. I hope I was able to make a little bit of sense.
Thank you so much, sir. That was such a wonderful talk. A great insight into all the different new age optical biometers, and definitely go a long way for all us young cataract and refractive surgeons in selecting which biometer we could go in for in today's times. We move on to our next speaker. Then our next speaker for the day is Dr. Shilpa Kodkani. Ma'am, she is a renowned cataract and refractive surgeon from the Kodkani Eye Center in Belgaum. She has been present on many national and international forums and presented various papers and talks in them. Her talk for today is about the new age IOL formulae. Ma'am, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you for the introduction. Shall I share my slides now?
Sure, ma'am.
Okay. So after having heard Dr. Gaurav about which machine to buy, let's go back into the basics and see what are the new generation formulas and what is their effectiveness. Now, no topic on IOL formulas can go ahead without remembering this man, Dr. Fedorov, who at that time, way back in the 1960s, came up with the Vergence formulas, which are even used today. And the primary goal, and probably even the weakness, has been the accurate effective lens position estimation for getting better and better at prediction of errors. So the routine standard IOL formula that we use now are the third, fourth generation, and newer formulas keep coming. Initially, we had the Hoffer Q for short eyes, SRKT for normal eyes, Holiday 1 for long eyes, and the newer generation formulas wherein we can try and get one-step solution for all eyes using more variables. And so depending upon the variables that are being used, these formulae can be divided into the various options that we have. Vergence formulas basically use the corneal power in two ways. Corneal power is directly used in the Vergence calculation to predict the post-operative refraction and also the prediction of the ELP. That is the depth of the IOL relative to the cornea. And in the earlier formulas, it was assumed that it would be 4.5 millimeters for all eyes. And this is where the mistake was. And that's why came the third generation IOLs formulas, wherein 3 variables were used. And in this case, the formulas got better and accuracies got better. But in these formulas, it was assumed that short eyes with flat case had shallow ELPs and longer eyes with steeper case had deeper ELPs. But it was Jack Holliday during his method of finding new, going from Holiday 1 to Holiday 2, found that people, about 80% of people with short axial lens had anterior segment size which was normal. And even the longer axial length people had 90% of people had an anterior segment which was of a normal size. And this was where probably the error was coming in. And that's why he came out with a formula which had 7 variables, which the 2 extra variables were pre-op refraction and patient stage. And so formulas have come in to try and incorporate a wider range of axial lens to be able to get one-step formula for all axial lens and keratometries. But it was found in an analysis of more than 13,000 surgeries that all formulas, including the third generation formulas, had a prediction error of within 0.1 diopters when the axial length was between 23 and 25. And Hoffer, in a study of about 300 eyes, found that the Holiday 2 was more accurate than Holiday 1, equal to Hoffer Q in shorter eyes less than 22, but in other axial length categories, it was not so accurate. So this brings to question whether the additional effort of obtaining the added parameters, going to more and more variables, whether it was really yielding more accurate results or not. And then came the High-GIS formula, which introduced 3 independent constants, that is A0, A1, and A2, which were optimized via linear regression to increase the prediction accuracy. It was found by Melz et al. That the High-GIS formula would give a good prediction error of for a longer, wider range of axial lengths and AC depths. But in this study, it was found that 0.125 diopters was the prediction error, but there was a hyperopic error when it went to the ends of the spectrum. So the Barrett Universal 2 is found to be one of the most popular and accurate IOL formulas in use today. It has 5 variables, more accurate due to the incorporation of the principal plane of the IOL into the formula, which is a relevant variable. And why it's called universal is because it covers, it maintains an accuracy across a wider range of axial lengths and ACDs, which has been found in various studies. Now, the Barrett Universal 2 is found on the ASCRS.org website, which can be very easily used. And of course, it is incorporated in the newer optical biometers, like what Dr. Gaurav said. Now, if you take an example here, this is a patient where we have used the SRKT formula. The axial length is less than 22, and you get a power for your IQ lens to be around 27.5. When you do an immersion, you find that it is 27. Now, yes, 80% of the time you would be accurate, but all these things, the newer advances are so that we can go higher in our percentages of accuracy to at least 90 to 95%. And that is why then these kind of formulas do come into play, and we can feed in these parameters into the ASCRS Barrett 2 formula, and you can even feed in the lens thickness and white to white. Now, mind you, on the IOL Master 500, you don't get the lens thickness. Neither is the white to white very accurate. So this needs to come from another machine. And here you get 27.5. So when you compare more formulas, you get a better prediction accuracy. Even the Barrett Toric is available, which will give a good accuracy rate. Now, there are other technologies like the ray tracing and the artificial intelligence. The Olsen formula uses the ray tracing, wherein it takes into consideration the lens thickness and the preoperative anterior chamber depth, as opposed to the earlier formulas, which would take in the corneal height or the corneal diameter. Now, the Olsen formula has the C constant, which is mathematically relates to the center of the IOL to the preoperative ACD. The lens constant does not take care of the axial length and corneal power, but instead the lens thickness and the dimension of the anterior chamber. And it is the ray tracing formula is advantageous because it considers the asphericities and other aberrations of the cornea. The artificial intelligence formula, that is a Hill RBF, it and the regression analysis of a very large database. So it covers a wider range of axial lengths and corneal powers. And you can put it again in the ASCRS.org website, and you put in your key in your data, and you get something like this. If you can see here, RBF calculation is out of bounds. Out of bound means that at present the AI database doesn't have enough data paralleling your specific case to support the calculation to 90% accuracy. So version 2 and 3 have come in, which are more, so the out of bounds goes into in bounds when the versions get higher. So these are some of the studies which are, and the Kane formula, which is above, it's a added advantage. The EVO, there have been studies which find that Kane's is 72% more accurate. And then we also have an Indian study in the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology, where it is compared on the Lenstar, and it is seen that there is no statistical difference between all these newer formulas. Can I take a minute more, Nikhil?
Sure, ma'am. Go ahead.
So, as far as the IOL formulas go, we find that the anterior corneal surface is measured, the posterior surface is extrapolated to a ratio of 0.8, and that is where we can go wrong. And that's why going away, and in special situations like corneal ectasias, post-LVC, pediatric cataracts, you cannot use these formulas wherein the corneal power is the main parameter. So on an average, I would say that when we have the option of achieving 90% of 0.5 diopters of accuracy, I think we should go in for it. And the take-home message is we need to incorporate newer formulas to be able to get to those accuracies. And IOL Master 500 does not calculate lens thickness, and that's why we need to go to better machines probably. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was such a lovely talk.
Try to cram in as much as possible.
There's a very wide array of topics to be put into a presentation. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation, ma'am.
Thank you.
So we move on. We go on to our next speaker for the day. Our next speaker for the day is Dr. Pavitra Patel. She has just recently finished her cataract and refractive fellowship from Narayan Nethralaya. She's a dynamic young surgeon who has presented various papers on national and international stage and was also awarded the AIOS Heroes Award last year. Today, she would be talking about the role of topography in cataract surgery. Over to you, Pavitra.
Thank you, Dr. Nikhil, for having me here. Good morning, everyone. So we've been using topographers widely and primarily for refractive surgeries, but now its role in cataract surgery per se is becoming more and more important. So with the advent of state-of-the-art technology, cataract surgery is now turning into a refractive surgery with patients demanding flawless quantity as well as quality of vision. However, for achieving optimum quality of vision, post-cataract surgery, optical biometry is just not enough. So hitting the target bang on, it requires three things. First is accurate planning, perfect execution, and impeccable refined instrumentation. So one such instrument is corneal topographer. It helps in IOL power calculation, deciding the type of IOL, and aids in giving optimal quality of vision, especially in premium IOLs. Additionally, it also helps in diagnosing various corneal conditions that are otherwise missed or can hamper the quality of vision. And these conditions mainly include keratoconus, pellucid marginal degenerations, post-refractive cataract evaluation, astigmatism, which is induced by pterygium or corneal scars, and presence of anterior basement membrane dystrophy. Also, it helps us in planning limbal relaxing incisions and arcuate incisions. Therefore, understanding the importance of cornea before planning any IOL calculation is of utmost value, because irregular cornea will lead to either wrong IOL power calculation. It can result in postoperative glare or halos. It can also cause reduced quality of vision because of induced abrasions, and can lead to incorrect assessment of LRIs or arcuate incisions. So now in cataract per se, it helps us in pentacam nucleus. There's something called as pentacam nucleus staging. It also helps in planning premium IOLs, aids in calculating IOL power post-refractive surgery or in ectasia patients. So to begin with, we'll see what exactly is pentacam nucleus staging. This is particularly helpful in those patients where clinically we don't really see any cataract or any signs of any signs which mainly suggest the decrease in vision, but the patient often complains of blurring of vision. So basically this pentacam nucleus staging, it offers an objective measure of the lens nuclear density of nuclear cataracts, and therefore it might be useful to evaluate the progression of the cataract objectively in our clinical practice. Next, we talk about the use of topographers in planning toric IOLs. So it has been very well known that automated keratometry performs poorly in cases of suboptimal ocular surfaces. So therefore, corneal topography is a prerequisite to obtain reliable measurements of astigmatism as well as the axial position in candidates for toric IOL. So this is a scan which is known as holiday equivalent keratometry reading map, which is available on Pentacam Topographer. This map was basically designed to take into account the refractive effect of both anterior as well as posterior surfaces of the cornea. And it gives here, as you can see, it gives here the zonal distribution of keratometry readings. Now, normally the difference in the EKR 65 mean over here, the third one, between the zone 2 to 4.5 mm should be less than 1.2 diopters for it to be normal. And the difference in the steep axis astigmatism should be less than 10 degrees in the same zone. Also, the histogram here that we see should not be widely skewed, and it should be a tall single peak. So all of this here in this patient is well within the normal range. Therefore, we can very well go ahead with the toric IOL in such patients. Now here in this scan, same things, if we see the difference in the EKR mean here is more than 1.2 diopters. The astigmatism is basically more than 10 degrees across 2 to 4.5 mm zone. And also the histogram is widely skewed over starting from 54 to 80 diopters. So therefore, this means the cornea is irregularly irregular, and this cannot be an ideal candidate for implanting toric IOLs. So next we talk about planning of multifocal IOLs in normal as well as in post-refractive surgery patients. So this is a post-LASIK patient who came for cataract surgery. Here on the axial scan, we see there is a slightly decentered ablation. So now here, this is a Zernicke's pyramid, which we again get it on Pentacam. This mainly tells us about the presence of higher and lower order abrasions. Now lower order abrasions are here, which can be normally corrected by glasses, and higher order abrasions are the ones which mainly causes decrease in the quality of vision and are not corrected by glasses. So it mainly includes vertical and horizontal coma, trefoil, quadrifoil, etc. Here we can see it also gives us root mean square values of both the lower and higher order abrasion. So here in this particular patient, the root mean square of higher order abrasion is more than 0.5, which is above the normal range. Here it is 0.9. So because there were higher corneal abrasions seen, this patient won't be an ideal candidate for multifocal intraocular lens, as these aberrations post-operatively can cause decrease in the quality of vision by causing glare and halos. And therefore, we can go ahead with a monofocal IOL and not a multifocal. So this is a case of normal patient coming to us with a opinion for cataract surgery. Patient has a symmetric bow tie, as we can see here on the axial map. Now here on seeing the Zernicke's pyramid, the root mean square of higher order aberration is less than 0.5, which is within the normal limit. And that means that this patient can very well go ahead with a multifocal IOL, provided the retina is normal and other parameters which are required prerequisites for MFIL are within normal limits. Next, I'll be discussing about how topography helps in deciding the type of IOL in ectatic corneas. So first and foremost, before planning the IOL, one should be looking checking for the location of the cone, where exactly it is located. It can be either peripheral located, or can be centrally located, or it can be bisecting the visual axis. So how do we decide the location of cone? So we basically have to see the posterior surface here, back surface of the cornea. Central cone is the one wherein the cone is within more than 50% of the cone is within the 3 mm zone, and a decentered cone is the one where more than 50% is outside the 3 mm zone. So this is basically a decentered cone. Now here again, we have a highly, the difference in the EKR 65 mean is more than 1.2 diopters with a astigmatism of more than 10 degrees across the different zones. Also, we have a widely skewed histogram, which is again not an ideal case for toric IOL implantation. And this is another case where we have a cone bisecting the pupil, basically a central cone, with a difference of less than 1.2 diopters in the EKR 65 mean and less than 10 degrees in the astigmatism. Also, we have a single peak here, which is therefore an ideal case for toric IOL implantation. This is a case of pellucid marginal degeneration, again because of widely skewed histogram and the difference not within the normal limits. This cannot be an ideal case for toric IOLs. Next, lastly move on to Yeah. We move on to the planning of post-refractive surgery, planning of IOLs in post-refractive surgery patients. So this is a case of basically 60-year-old female who presented to us with cataract surgery, who is who had undergone LASIK surgery 30 years back, and there were no previous records available. So, and this patient had a well-centered ablation. So in this scan, the difference in the EKR 65 mean here is more than 1.2 diopters. Also, the steep axis, the values of the astigmatism axis is more than 10 degree. Also, we see a broad flat histogram. So therefore, this post-LASIK patient is not an ideal candidate for a for a multifocal IOL. And once we have the pentacam readings, we can very well go to the online ASCRS calculator, click on the prior myopic LASIK or the PRK box here. Next, you see the box wherein you need to fill the pre-op and the post-op data. Target refraction should be always kept at 0 here in post-LASIK patients. And then we fill in the zonal wise the values of keratometry readings. Also, we fill in the biometry readings here. And so in the next box, we get the IL power calculation done by different formulae. And here, because we didn't have the pre-op LASIK data, we will get the different IL power here on our right side. And depending on that, we also get average, minimum, and maximum power. So for post-LASIK patients, we use the minimum IL power, which has been calculated as is been suggested by the published data. Similarly, in RK patients, the only thing that we see is instead of taking the minimum power, we take here the average IOL power because of the possibility of post-surgery hyperopic shift. Thank you.
It was a great presentation, Dr. Pavitra. What we could do is if there are any one who would like to discuss on any of the above topics, we could do a discussion right now on the same, or we can do that even after the entire session ends.
Doctor, there are allotted 15 minutes later on for discussion, so we can keep it on time and we can continue with the other speakers.
Sure. Okay, fine. So proceeding on, I would be giving the next talk of this IC, which would be on the role of aberrometry in cataract surgery. I'm just going to share my screen. Please give me a second. So my topic is delivering unaberrated vision, role of aberrometry in cataract surgery. Now, as we know, cataract has evolved over the years from couching to ICC to ECC to SICS to phaco. Right now, with the invent of premium IOLs and femtosecond laser assisted cataract surgery has become more of a refractive surgery. In today's era of perfect vision, patients demand not only 20/20 vision, but exemplary subjective quality of vision too. So, as we know, this is our normal optical system. But if there are any imperfections in our optical system, which causes poor quality of images, it is known as an aberration. Now, aberrometry is the principle of recording these aberrations, which can be either done by a forward projection or a backward projection. The Shering's principle helps us is a way of a forward projection aberrometry. The ray tracing is also a forward projection, whereas the Hartmann-Shack and the dynamic stereoscopy are backward projection methods. Now, how does this help us in our cataract surgery? Starting off, we'll talk about how it helps us in toric IOLs. So here we see an aberrometry done on the eye trace. What do we see here is it gives us all three, that is the internal, corneal, and the total aberrations of the eye. Here, it also gives us a tracy refraction and the higher order aberrations. Now, if we take a case example here, the cylinder here of the patient, what the patient is accepting is a 0.25 diopter. But when we did his pentacam, his astigmatism is coming to 1.4 diopters. Now, why is this discrepancy there? So should we actually go ahead with a toric IOL or a simple monofocal IOL in this patient? The role of aberrometry helps us here. What we see is that the patient has a high amount of corneal astigmatism, which is being compensated by the lens. Now, that is why the patient is accepting a low total astigmatism. In this case, once the patient undergoes cataract surgery, the lens will automatically be replaced and the corneal astigmatism will be manifested. And hence, we should go ahead with a toric IOL in this case. Coming to case example 2, here a patient shows a cylinder, accepts a cylinder of -2, has a high amount of astigmatism on the topography. Also, there's no discrepancy. Straightforward, a toric IOL can be implanted in this patient. The aberrometry of such a patient shows you that the patient has only corneal abrasions with minimal lenticular abrasions, and hence the high astigmatism also, which is seen on the topographer. So again, coming to a third case example, here the patient has a cylindrical, a cylinder acceptance of 1.75 diopters, but a very low corneal astigmatism here. Again, a discrepancy arises. Again, we don't know whether should we go ahead with a toric or a monofocal IOL. Here, the role of aberrometry shows us that the patient has low corneal astigmatism, but a high amount of lenticular astigmatism, due to which the patient has a high total astigmatism. And after cataract surgery in this patient, the patient can be very well treated with just a monofocal IOL and a non-toric IOL because the patient's corneal astigmatism is low. Now, the iTrace also gives you a pre-op planning station. It also captures a reference image, which helps you to compensate for cyclotorsion when the patient is in a horizontal position. Coming to multifocal IOLs, again, you can do an analysis of the aberration profile. Here we see the patient has significant corneal HOAs, and in such a patient, a multifocal IOL is best not implanted. It is said that if the aberrations are more than 500 microns, the patient is not a suitable candidate for multifocal IOLs. In this patient, we see the patient has very minimal corneal HOAs, and such a patient would be an ideal candidate for multifocal IOLs. For multifocal IOLs, another recent publications tell us that it is important to study this angle alpha. Now, what exactly is angle alpha? Here we see the blue cross denoting the center of the limbus, the red cross the center of the visual axis, and the green cross the center of the pupil. The angle alpha is the angle between the optical and the visual axis. If in normal conditions, this should be between 0.3 and 0.5. If the angle is more than 0.5, such patients are not good candidates for multifocal, and are the ones who would typically complain of negative dysphotopsia like glares, halos, and all post-operatively. So here, if you see a case example, you can see that once the IOL was implanted, because of the large angle alpha, how widely dispersed the third and the first Purkinje images are. And so this patient was not a good suitable for MF-IOL implantation and had a poor image quality due to the misalignment of the axis. Here, if you see, this patient has the first and the third Purkinje images so close to each other with an angle alpha of just 0.1. That is a good angle alpha, and hence is a good ideal candidate for MF-IOL implantation and would have good amount of image quality post the MF-IOL implantation. How does it help us in IOL selection? Now, it is well known that the cornea is usually prolate with a negative Q value of 0.26. Post myopic LASIK, these patients the cornea becomes oblate and the Q value becomes positive. If you see here, these patients have a positive spherical aberration, and hence implantation of aspheric IOLs with a negative spherical aberration should be done in these patients, as compared to a post-hyperopic LASIK, where a patient has the cornea post the hyperopic LASIK becomes more prolate. Therefore, the patient has more amount of negative spherical aberrations, and hence an implantation of spherical IOL with a positive spherical aberration should be done. In patients of post-RK or in decentered ablations, where there are higher order aberrations are outbounds, in these cases, you should just go ahead with a zero spherical aberration IOL. Coming to DLI, it's called a dysfunctional lens index. Here we see a clear lens, and yet the patients there are with a 6/6 vision and an N6 complain of glares, halos, and starbursts and difficulty in night driving. So why is it that even though their lens is clear, that they complain of this? It is something known as dysfunctional lens index, which takes into consideration the internal HOAs, the pupil size, and the contrast sensitivity. It is a new parameter that judges that even though the patient is giving you 6/6 vision and there are no significant visible changes on the slit lamp, the patient here, if you see, has a level of 5.78 DLI, which means that the patient has started showing early lenticular changes. and they can go ahead with the cataract surgery in this case. Anyone above the level of 5 should be considered for a cataract refractive lens exchange, and lesser than 5 should not be. Now coming to decentrations, here we see how the Purkinje images are widely spaced from each other. They have increased HOA, so poor quality of vision. We recentered this patient, and you now see how good the closely spaced the images are with minimal HOAs and a good quality of vision. Now coming to the toric IOL alignment, the eye trace also gives you a post-op toric IOL alignment. Here we see that the desired axis was 102, the measured axis was 108, so a 6-degree misalignment here. In cases of large rotations, we know that there is a lot of reoccurrence of the cylindrical power which takes place, which is also given by the eye trace. Now coming to the next case. The next case is here we see that in PCOs and in case of glistenings, patient have high amount of lenticular or internal abrasion, but minimal corneal abrasions. These patients post a YAG, or in case of a glistening, a removal and an explantation of the glistened IOL and a reimplantation of a monofocal IOL would do very well. Coming to lenticular conditions, this is a case of a coloboma. Again, here we see high internal or lenticular abrasions, whereas minimal corneal abrasions. A refractive lens exchange, a clear lens extract would significantly decrease the internal abrasions here. Finally, coming to a lenticonus, again, high internal spherical abrasions. Post a clear lens extraction, patient is much better with minimal amount of internal spherical abrasions. Hence, aberrometry can help us in many ways, even in our cataract surgery. Thank you. I would now request for our next talk, which we can, Dr. Vavikar. Sir, Dr. Vavikar, sir, is the director of Vavikar Eye Institute at Thane. He's a renowned cataract and refractive surgeon and has spoken on numerous national and international forums. Sir would be talking to us today on the optimizing the surgically induced astigmatism and lens constants, a topic which all our new young refractive surgeons and cataract surgeons would benefit a lot from. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nikhil, for the kind words, and good morning, everybody. So I'm going to talk on optimizing SIA and various lens constants. I hope you can hear me clearly, and you can also see the slides. So we'll talk about the SIA first. Why we need to measure SIA? So the final postoperative cylinder is a measure of ACA, anterior corneal astigmatism, posterior corneal astigmatism, and the incision-induced astigmatism, which we call as SIA, or surgically induced astigmatism. Now, average is 0.1, but there is a lot of variability, and there are many factors on which it depends. And therefore, putting an average SIA makes the calculation very precise. Now, previously we was using mean or median SIA, but now we have to think of centroid SIA. Let us see why. Mean or median refers to average of a single set of points, that is the magnitude, whereas centroid refers to average of multiple set of points, that is magnitude as well as direction. Because astigmatism is a vector, it has got two components, direction as well as the magnitude. Now let us take an example. A patient, there are two cases with temporal incision. One is having induced an SIA of 0.5 at 160 degrees, and the other case has induced SIA of 0.5 at 20 degrees. Then that means just above and below the temporal incision, straddling the incision. If you do the mean of only the magnitude, the mean would be 0.5. But if you do the centroid, because you take into consideration the direction, the centroid would be 0. And therefore, very, very important that we shift to centroid. So it's a better way of calculating SI. It takes into account both, and average of all the means of all the vectors is done by a double angle plot. I will not get into the details of that. How do you calculate? Simplest way is go to Dr. Warren Hill's website. Welcome to SI calculator. All the terms and conditions guidelines are written. You have to fill in all the data required. That is the pre-op refraction, post-op refraction, pre-op K, post-op K, and the details about the incision. And this is the output. On the left-hand side is the mean, and on the right-hand side is the centroid. You can, so you have to send minimum 20 cases, but better to send 30 cases for temporal, supertemporal each, and superior wherever you are comfortable with taking incisions. But for default value, you can start with 0.1. Okay, now let us go to the next part, that is the IOL lens constant optimization. Anybody who wants to have very good refractive results after cataract surgery needs to do this. So what is the lens constant? These are the constants or specific adjustment factors which improve the predictability of the effective lens position, which is the primary source of error in the IOL power calculation. So why optimize? Of course, to improve the refractive outcomes and patient patient satisfaction. Currently, most of the cataract surgeons can achieve refractive outcomes within plus or minus 0.5 in about 70 to 75% of the cases. But reportedly, top 1% of the surgeons can attain this level of accuracy in 90% of the cases. Optimization of constants improve the chances of residual error to be within plus or minus 0.5 fourfolds. This is a study I picked up. You can see that at 0.5 without optimization, 16% patients are within plus or minus 0.5, and after optimization, it has jumped to 64%, exactly fourfold. And then why do we need optimization? Because there are many factors which decide the ELP. And they have been divided into multiple sets. These are some of the sets: non-standardized measuring instruments, population differences, formula inadequacies, surgical techniques, lens geometry, lens material, etc. And therefore, all of them for a particular surgeon are supposed to be fairly constant. And that's why we need to do it for each and every surgeon. Now, this is the list of all the things. What are the constants which are used in each formula? Let us not get too much into the theory. So the first optimization is done by the manufacturer. Manufacturer will recommend a lens constant based on the material and the design, and there will be few cases done, and after back calculation, it will be fine-tuned. Then the lens will be implanted by larger group of surgeons and further tweaking it done. Aura system is also getting into global optimized lens constant. I'll come to that little later. Now, once this is done, you go to personalization of the lens constant. As a start, what do you require for that? Post-operative manifest refraction, pre-operative uncorrected and post-operative uncorrected and base corrected visual acuity, pre-operative all the measurements, IOL power and design of the implanted IOL, that is the name, brand name, and IOL power formula used for pre-op calculation, so that you will know what was the predicted residual refraction. So to start with, we go to ULIB website. ULIB is User Group of Laser Interference Biometry. There are A constants which are been devised, depending upon a large population of surgeons, and we can start that as a starting point. And after that, if you personalize this further, number one, either you go to Warren Hill website and nice instructions are given. If you go through, again, you require 30 cases, it is done. Second thing is that on the higher end instruments like IOL Master 500, 700, Lenstar, this facility is available. There are benefits of doing it here though. Number one, all IOL Master data is readily available, so there is no chance of transcription error. What you have to put in is only IOL power and post-op refraction. You get a summary, how many cases and what is the range of axial length which is being used for optimization, so that you can optimize it for different axial lengths. Then at a time, all lens constants are simultaneously updated. That means you can use Huygens or Hoffer-Q, SRKT, etc. Everything is done simultaneously. Now, the last 2 points. Number one, Aura is a intraoperative aberrometry. They are doing work on getting global optimized lens constant and associated regression coefficients, and which is supposed to help us in a big way. As of now, Aura is not available to many people because we do not know where it is really working, what are the factors which are affecting it. So we can just start with whatever data they give it. The last point is that whether we optimize or not, SRKT with optimization is a very good formula. So people who do not have higher end machines, no problem. Use SRKT after two things. Number one, optimization, and number two, Bangkok modification for high myopic eye, that means long eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So there's one question. So after how many cases should you usually optimize a lens constant? As in how many implantation or how many lenses should you go ahead and then think of optimizing it?
Actually, ideally speaking, you can do it after 20 cases. Okay, but then there are other methods also. That means, suppose you get 5 cases where your refractive error is say 0.1. For every 0.1, you make a change of 0.12 in SRKT. So there are other methods also available. That way you start shifting yourself, but after 25-30, you get bang on target. Yes, you are getting it. There will be a problem if in some cases you are left with a myopic residual, and in some cases you are left with hyperopic residual. Then it becomes a problem that you have to do a larger study.
Right. And so regarding to when you're optimizing it, it's always to a particular formula. So example, if you are using an SRKT, you have to optimize your lens constant according to that itself. What if you're switching on to a new formula, like in case of in long eyes, you want to do a Barrett's or something in that sort? How do you go about optimizing your lens constants for that?
Same data can be used for optimization of all constants.
Okay.
So if you have a case series of 30, okay, right, you can optimize for any constant. Only what you will have to do in the pre-op data, you will have to just change the formula you use. Why? Because the predicted residual error we need to know.
Okay.
Because predicted residual error and the actually what is the post-op residual error, they are compared, and that is how the formula shifted for you, and that shifting is called personalization. So if you have a data of 30 cases, you just keep on changing the pre-op formula, and you will keep on getting optimization for each. In fact, IOL Master does it for all constants simultaneously.
Thank you so much, sir, for that lovely talk. We go on to our next talk right now. Our next talk for the day is from Dr. Nitin Balakrishnan. He is the chairman of Saideep Eye Clinic and Crystal Vision Laser Center, a renowned cataract and refractive surgeon again. And he has been on many national and international podiums. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Nikhil, for those kind words. Right at the onset, I would like to thank Dr. Partha Biswas and the AIOS for the lovely effort done in spite of all these problems to have this lovely virtual meeting, and for having had this nice instruction course. I do not have any financial interest in any of the procedures or techniques mentioned in this particular course. Cataract surgery, like we all know, and like other speakers have also elucidated, that has now become a procedure which is far away from what it was in the past, which was just a vision restoring surgery, to a more precise and a more accurate and a surgery which has now slowly transformed itself into a precision refractive surgery. In today's era, when we plan everything, that is plan our travel, plan our meals, I think it's high time that we also learn to plan our cataract surgery right at the beginning. So basically, we need to see that even before you take the patient on the table, our surgery is well planned. Now, image-guided systems are the systems which are used not only for planning, but also for implementing these plans on the table. image guided systems which we've been using are basically of two types, the Varion and the Callisto. The Callisto has one disadvantage. The major disadvantage over the Varion is it does not have its own measuring unit, and it relies on the data which is acquired from the IOL Master 500 or the IOL Master 700 to which it is directly linked. In the Varion, on the other hand, you have a unit which helps to measure the keratometry. It has a planning station, and it has a surgical guide where there is an overlay during the surgery. Now, in the image acquisition, what happens is the measuring unit measures the scleral vessels. It takes a high definition photograph of the scleral vessels, the limbus, and of the iris. Now, this creates a unique fingerprint of the eye, which is used for registering and tracking the eye during the surgery. And this will also help us prevent any errors due to cyclotorsion which occur when the patient from a sitting position moves into a horizontal position. It also measures the corneal spherical power. And this corneal spherical power is measured by the back and forth movement of the console with the help of the three infrared LEDs. And this is measured. What happens is the unit takes about 300 infrared images over a period of 20 seconds and scans an area of about 0.8 to 1.2 millimeters of the cornea with the help of 900 plus corneal reflections. The corneal cylindrical power is measured with the help of the 12 white LED with the console in the still position, not in the forward and backward moving position. It takes about a second, and it is done with the help of 3 to 5 white light images over an area of about 2.8 millimeters of the cornea, and with the help of the 60 corneal reflections. The end result after measurement is a picture like this, where you have the data of the limbus, that means the white to white, the pupillary data, the pupillary diameter, the steep and the flat K1, K2, along with the axis and the net cylinder. Once all these are acceptable, you could press the accept switch, after which this data is transferred to the planning station. The greatest advantage of the measuring unit of the Varion is that it can measure the corneal curvature and the axis in other conditions, in conditions where other keratometers fail, like in post-keratoplasty, pterygiums, corneal scars, post-RK cases, to name a few. The other advantage is that this marks out not only the center of the visual, the center of the limbus, but also marks out all the three centers. That means the center of the limbus, the center of the pupil, and the visual center. The data transfer, like I said, is from the acquiring unit is now sent to the planning unit. In the planning unit, one can compare the K1, K2s of the various readings taken by the Varion along with the other fed-in readings, which could be either from the IOL Master, the LensStar, or any other optical biometer. Once having done that, you can have the IOL power calculation. There are various formulae which are pre-fed in the planning station, which also include the Barrett suite. And online, one can actually compare all the IOL powers which are given by the different formulae. At the same time, we can also select the right toric IOL power and the wound construction. One can change the residual cylinder by moving the main incision to either side of the horizontal, and this helps us to reduce the residual astigmatism after the toric IOL surgery. The IOL power selection here with the Varion is done not only on a spherical equivalent like in a normal optical biometer, but it gives you the post-operative refraction. Like here, it shows the sphere and the cylinder and the axis of what would be left behind after the surgery. It also gives you the expected post-operative SIA Ks. That means what would be the K value after the surgery with that particular type of SIA which has been fed in for that particular surgery. So the outcomes are totally detailed. You can also have a selection of either the optical or the ultrasound biometer, and the machine would automatically choose the A constant depending on the type of the biometer used. At the same time, you can have either you can choose either a virgin eye where no refractive surgery has been done, or you can choose a case where either a myopic or a hyperopic or an RK has been done as a refractive surgery. The IOL power for other ocular conditions like keratoconus, silicon filled eye, scleral buckle, or any other eye pathologies can be chosen, and the unit would therefore make the necessary adjustments in getting us the final IOL power. At the same time, one can choose either a phakic or a pseudophakic mode. And during the phakic mode, one can decide whether you want to place the lens in the bag or in the sulcus. And one doesn't need to then calculate what would be the power of the IOL when it's placed in the sulcus, because that would be directly displayed if we have chosen the sulcus mode. There is a list of lenses which are already there with the manufacturer given A constant, but we can feed in our own A constant. And like Dr. Abhikar mentioned, if one does an optimization, one can have a surgeon's own A constant here, which is again done by feeding in the post-operative data into the Varian at the end of the say 3 to 6 weeks, and therefore one can get the SIA with the one can get the personalized A constant without having to go on an online calculator. The SIA optimization, what Dr. Abhikar mentioned, the importance of the SIA optimization is also can be done here on an automated basis. The only important thing is to feed in the K1, K2 value of the pre-op value, and the post-op value should be measured on the same unit. So if it is being measured on the Varian, the pre-op, the post-op also should be measured on the Varian to have a proper SIA. Arcuate incision can be planned. Can I take a minute and a half more, please?
You could, no problem.
So arcuate incisions can be planned, and here again you can know the depth of the incision, the exact location of the incision, and this helps us in further decreasing the post-operative residual cylinder. Having done this, the data from the planning station is transferred to the operation theater unit with the help of a pen drive, and you get an overlay of all these details into the eyepiece of the microscope. So here you can get the exact position of the lens, exact position of the incision, which was planned pre-operatively. The main as well as the side port incisions can be planned, and this is displayed. The exact size of the rhexis as well as where the rhexis is centered is displayed on the overlay. So you can have the rhexis centered either on the visual axis or on the pre-op pupil center or in the center of the limbus. So here is a short video to show how this is done. So you see here the side port as well as the main incision. 3 incisions can be planned, the 2 side ports as well as the main incision. And the exact location without any cyclotorsion errors can be achieved with the help of this overlay. At the same time, the toric lens alignment with the help of a total horizontal axis line is seen. So both the positioning holes of the IOL can be exactly centered on this particular line for the toric alignment. So it's very important to note that there can be an error of about 5 to 7 degrees when you use the normal conventional marking with an ink because of the smudged markings on the cornea. Now, this can give rise to a lot of residual cylindrical error in spite of using a toric IOL. This is therefore negated when you are using an overlay with a Varian. The final centration of the lens, again centered to depending on the visual axis or the pupil or the limbus, can be achieved as planned with the help of the overlay, which is very important in multifocal and aspheric IOL. Again, the finalization here after sealing of the wound can be achieved. And this is a small video to display here how this is done, and see the perfection with which a multifocal IOL is centered not only on the visual axis as well as the axis of the toric multifocal IOL is exactly matching the pre-planned overlay which is displayed. The other advantage of the Varian is that it can be coupled with the Lensex. So all the arcuate incisions, the incision which is done by the Lensex can be transferred to the Lensex, and therefore it can aid in getting better results even with the Lensex. Thank you for your kind attention.
That was a lovely talk, sir. There was one question. If in case of a toric IOL, if you have a rotation post toric IOL, does the Varion have any method of capturing and telling you that the IOL has rotated from its desired axis?
You mean post-operatively or you mean on the table?
If post-operatively, example, post-op day 1 or after a week, if the eye is imaged, is there a way in which the IOL has rotated? Can that be noted by the Varion?
What can be done, it cannot be noted directly by the Varion, but what can be done is the exact placement axis on the Varion can be noted. And having done that, when the patient comes for a follow-up, you can see the exact position of the lens on the slit lamp. And this can be compared degree to degree. And therefore, we could know how much of a degree of rotation has occurred after reviewing the Varion data as well as the post-operative data on the slit lamp.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful IC that we had, covering a wide array of topics, right from the different biometers, the different formulae, the use of topographers and aberrometers in the study, optimizing your lens factors, your A constants, knowing your SIA, and finally coming to image guided systems. So we've covered a lot in this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gaurav Luthra, sir, Dr. Shilpa Kodkani, ma'am, Dr. Vavikar, sir, Dr. Nitin Balakrishnan, sir, Dr. Pavitra, everyone, for a lovely session. I think we finished well in time also. If in case there are any discussions, otherwise we can conclude the session now. Do we have any questions from the audience?
The hall coordinator would be able to let us know whether there are any questions from the audience.
No question from audience, sir.
Okay, fine. I think then that would be it. Thank you so much, AIOS, Dr. Partha Biswas, sir, for giving us an opportunity to present different work here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Very nice session. Thank you.